Hey, what's going on? This is the Body Punch Podcast. My name is Nas. Let's talk about this weekend's fight card. On December 19th, we have a low-key, kind of fun fight card this weekend. I was going through my notes, and I like to make notes about the fights that are going on, and just to go through the whole fight card and see if there's anything that I'm going to miss or whatever it is. And I was going through this, and I'm like, man, there has been no marketing push for this fight card. This might be due to the fact that last weekend we got a crazy fight card. It was going to be the last pay-per-view of the year, and they didn't want to stack this one too much. I think that might be one of the reasons. There could be multiple other reasons. I've heard some other outlets talk about the fact that the UFC is spending so much money on other things that they're trying to conserve their budget. This might be one reason as well. Whatever reason it is, a lot more people should be talking about this card. A lot more people should be mentioning the amount of star power that's on this card. This might also be due to the fact that it's headlined by Stephen Wonderboy Thompson and Jeff Neal. Now, nothing bad about these two fighters. They're some of the best. I think it's what happens is when a card is headlined by someone like this, you don't expect the rest of the card to deliver as much. You think that, okay, like Wonderboy's on this card, he's facing Jeff Neal. If that's the best of the best, then how can the rest of the card be any good? There's some cards that are out there where the cards or the fights underneath the main event are sometimes actually better and more interesting. They might just be more fun. And even though I think that the Wonderboy Thompson fight is going to be fun, it's going to be action-packed, it's going to be a great striking exchange. It's great to see Wonderboy Thompson back. But I think some of the other fights on this card are going to deliver a bit more. Now, this is just me saying it. Obviously, it always happens where you think one thing and then some random fight on the card ends up being fight of the year. Or it could be like the knockout of the year that we saw with Buckley. We didn't expect much from that fight. We knew that it was going to be two strong guys. But then all of a sudden, by one action, Buckley became a star and is being talked about all over the place. So who knows with this kind of stuff? It's just, I think what ends up happening is when you see the top of the card, you don't bother to explore the rest of it. This might be happening with this card, and maybe that's why people aren't mentioning it as much. Obviously, people got a lot better things to worry about this year, this month. But aside from that, I mean, going through the card, it got me a lot more excited. I'm not going to miss this event after going through it. Now, let's start from the bottom, and then we'll make our way to the top. So in the prelims, and I'm only going to go through notable fights in my opinion. In the prelims, we got a great fight with Deron Winn versus Antonio. Now, the reason I bring up this fight is, as a lot of you must know, is Deron Winn being a protege of DC Daniel Cormier. He's gone with the methodology of being the smaller guy in the fight, just like his teammate and partner at AKA Daniel Cormier. But Daniel Cormier does it at the higher weight divisions at 205 and heavyweight, or he did it. Now Deron Winn is trying to implement that same thing. He's fighting bigger, longer guys, and Deron Winn is going to be using his wrestling a lot in these fights. He works with DC a lot on his wrestling. He also works with DC when helping coach, I believe it was a school team. But all of those factors are really interesting to bring up. But I think the most notable thing is the first time that I saw Deron Winn, interesting enough, was the Tito Ortiz and Chuck Liddell fight. Now, that fight itself was horrible. Those two should have never fought. But Deron Winn was on that card. I forget who he faced, but it was a UFC veteran. It might have been Sam Alvey. I don't know. But Deron Winn went in there. He beat him. And that's where I saw Deron Winn's name come up. I heard about him a lot, but I never saw his fights, unfortunately, except for that one. After seeing that fight, I really started backing this guy, really started believing in what he was doing when it comes to being the smaller guy in these fights. So then he went on to win a couple. He lost a couple, but the interesting thing was that he's just now coming off a 9-month suspension, which he tested positive for amphetamines and had an $1,800 fine associated with it. Now, this guy, he had a lot of potential. He still has a lot of potential. But how will a 9-month suspension affect him? Now, he fought some talented guys. He fought Stewart, who we all know is explosive, fast, and he's always ready to scrap. Then he fought Mershaw, a jiu-jitsu phenom, a guy that can basically strangle you from any point. And he lost to them. He was on kind of a skid maybe, but now I think it's his last chance, and this is a must win for him. DC has a lot of high hopes for him. I have a lot of high hopes for him. And I just wanted to bring it up because I think it's one of the more interesting fights. It's got a lot riding on it. And interestingly enough, it's at a catch weight. So maybe that will help him. Maybe that won't. But this is a guy that we got to watch out for if he stays in the UFC or not. So after that, in the prelims, we got Anthony Pettis facing Alex Moreno. Now, interestingly enough, Anthony Pettis knocked out Wonderboy, who's headlining this card, with that amazing off the fence Superman punch. And the really interesting part of this fight is that we're going to see Anthony Pettis in a form that we might have not seen in a while. A lot of clips, a lot of interviews have been coming out talking about how Anthony Pettis has cleaned up his life. After his father passed, he started abusing marijuana. He started abusing alcohol. He started abusing all these things, in his opinion. And he felt like those things started affecting him, and he's cut all of them off. So now maybe this is what Anthony Pettis needs. Maybe this is what Anthony Pettis needs to move his career in the next stage, because at the end of the day, this guy is in the next stage of his career. He's not the same Showtime. He fights a lot different now. He's more calculated. His team in Milwaukee have really adjusted for the fighting style that he has now. I think his career went in maybe 3 stages so far. At the beginning, we saw Showtime with the Showtime kick and all the exciting stuff that he did, how he got his name onto the Wheaties box. Then we saw a Showtime Pettis who was more reserved. He really explored his jiu-jitsu. He focused on it, which meant that he was going for a lot more chokes. He was going for a lot more. I remember at one point he was just trying to hit everybody with that guillotine. And that, honestly, wasn't the same Showtime that we saw before. So obviously it was the second stage. So now we're in this third stage where he's aggressive. He comes to fight, but he's not throwing as much flashy stuff. He's not throwing flashy stuff every single time, which I think Anthony Pettis had big problems with at one point, where he was just trying to knock people out with flashy stuff. But then he has this style now, which he beat Pettis, or he beat Cerrone with, he beat Ferreira with, which is kind of stand there, use his Muay Thai, use his amazing striking, and to take out his opponent and not just rely on one of his skill sets. I think he's turning into a well-rounded fighter now who has the experience, but still keeps himself physically at his peak. So the next fight I want to talk about is in the main event. Now, this is a pretty long main event, but there's a couple fights that I wanted to talk about in particular. So the first one being the Marcin Tybura fight versus Greg Hardy. Now, this is interesting because if Greg Hardy wins this, the only way he can move is to the top guys now. Marcin Tybura, he's one of those guys that I've always seen you always got to watch out for, especially in the heavyweight division. People talk about it all the time because the fact is that these guys are so big, they're so powerful, that one punch, no matter who you are, can knock you out. Now, looking at Greg Hardy's record, he's passed a lot of really difficult tests, in my opinion. He beat De Castro, and De Castro, in my opinion, he was just he's a scary guy that you got to watch out for. They're all scary, but what I mean by that is that he throws all these orthodox kind of punches. He's knocked people out in weird ways. And we all have seen his devastating kind of power. Before that fight, we saw him lose to Volkov, which I don't think it was a major step back. It just showed that he wasn't ready for the top guys. And Volkov is at the top, especially for his tenure in the UFC. He's seen it all. But the last fight against Green was a big test for me as well. I think it was a big test for Greg Hardy, and it was because Green is long, he's got the reach, and the way that Hardy adapted to it in the second round, getting the KO, TKO finish, really showed a lot. And this next test for him is going to be, I mean, if he passes this one, he's got to go against some stiff competition after this one. I don't have the rankings right in front of me, but I'm sure that after this, they're sending this guy to the moon. He's already got a name. He can give other people a name. and everybody wants to fight him. Like, he's fighting a guy now. So his record is 7-2. He's fighting a guy that's 20-6. So, I mean, he's got a lot more fights. But will Greg Hardy's athletic prowess be able to beat Marcin Tybura? Now, the next fight after this one, I had no idea this fight was actually on the card, to be honest with you. Marlon Morais is facing Rob Font. Now, this is a bantamweight fight. This fight has a lot of implications as well. Marlon Morais being one of the scariest guys in that division. I'm looking at his photo right now, man. This guy's cut. This guy is athletic. But we did see him in one of his last fights just say that maybe I'm not ready. Maybe he never explicitly said that, but a lot of factors hinted to the fact that he was mentally done. Now, what has he done to help himself and his mental health? What has he done to almost bring back the magic Marlon Morais that we all fell in love with those crazy kicks, the crazy KOs? Just the excitement that he brought. Marlon Morais is always someone to watch out for. His last fight was a loss to Corey Sandhagen. I mean, Corey Sandhagen is at the top of the heat. And does that mean as much? It's just a Shark Tank at bantamweight. People are just going after it in that division at 135. It's like no holds bar at some points where people, you could lose to one guy. Like, look at this. Like, Marlon Morais beat Jose Aldo, for example. But Jose Aldo is still at the top of the bill. That's just because of name. But that's how much of a Shark Tank this fight is. I mean, Jose Aldo, will talk about it, but he's still in the bantamweight division. So, I mean, what happens there? So, yeah. And then the next fight after that, I just wanted to quickly talk about this. Michael Pierre-Pierre Lima, we all know him for his crazy antics, for doing all the rolls and all that kind of crazy stuff. I mean, this guy is someone to watch out for. His last fight, I believe, let me just search this up, but his last fight was something, it's against Maida. I don't even know how to say his name, but it was a submission win. I remember watching this fight. I was really impressed, especially for a guy that we know he really focuses on his striking. He really focuses on getting all the flashy kicks and wins and doing all that Eminari rolls and all that kind of stuff. And I mean, it was really impressive to see him get the submission win in that. That might have put him on the right track after losing a couple. But we'll see. Really exciting. And the UFC really believes in him because they're putting him at number 3 with all the... They're putting him number 3 in the main event with all these killers underneath him. So the fight right after that one is Jose Aldo versus Marlon Vera. Marlon Vera made his name against Sugar Sean. Jose Aldo has a name in the UFC Hall of Fame. I believe he should. I mean, why not? I think he's the greatest featherweight of all time. But this is a massive test for Marlon Vera. Marlon Vera, this fight will show us, is the hype real? Is this guy really here to make a run at the belt? Jose Aldo will show us that. I know Jose Aldo has fought most of his career at the featherweight division, but after seeing a couple of his bantamweight fights, against Marlon Morais and a couple other guys, you know that he is here to stay. I mean, he fought for the belt against Piotr Jan, and he didn't look that bad in it. I mean, he did lose that fight. Piotr Jan, he looks incredible. I talked about him before. He's got this crazy style with the boxing, and it just I love Piotr Jan's style. But Jose Aldo didn't look that bad in that fight. And Marlon Morais, this is a real test for him, like I just said. Is this guy for real? Is this guy the person that we think he is? I mean, the Sugar Sean fight, even though he won that, didn't show us much because of the leg injury. I mean, Sugar Sean, we all know the dynamic striker that he is. You take away his mobility, then, I mean, it's kind of tough to say. He did win the fight. He showed his mettle. But this fight is going to be a real test because this guy's no joke. Jose Aldo's no joke. We all know that. But I think people forget that because of all the stuff that's happened in his past. We all know the Conor McGregor stuff, the one-punch knockout. I think it's really affected people. And it's making people think that Jose Aldo is not the same person that he once was. So let's talk about the main event. Stephen Wonderboy Thompson is going against Jeff Neal. Stephen Wonderboy Thompson, really excited for this fight. It's a welterweight fight. Wonderboy was calling out a bunch of people before this one. I would have loved to seen him face Chimaev, or, I mean, that's a big jump for Chimaev, but he's called out so many people. I mean, the Leon Edwards fight for Chimaev I think it's perfect for him. It sucks for Leon Edwards if he loses, that this guy is going to jump straight to a title shot right after that. But hey, this is the UFC. This is the stuff that happens. This is why we love this. So let's talk about this fight with Wonderboy Thompson and Jeff Neal. Now, I think this is going to be a test for Jeff Neal, ranked number 11 going against number 5, a guy that's fought multiple times for the belt, has had some crazy fights with Tyron Woodley. A lot of people don't like those fights, but I mean, the first one was nuts. A guy that knows what it takes to get to the top, and one of those specialists that we've seen in the UFC. What I mean by that is, at one point we all thought that UFC fighters needed to be well-rounded. Now, fighters like Damian Maia, Wonderboy Thompson, and Khabib at the elite level where the guy's never lost, has shown us that being well-rounded may have its perks, but worrying about one skill set and focusing on it and making sure that you have some of your other bases covered, but putting all the chips in one corner might be the best way to be a fighter. Now, there can be argument for both sides, but look at Adesanya, for example, a guy that heavily relies on his striking, who heavily relies on just knowing that he's a better striker than you, being able to quickly dodge and parry punches and hit you with angles that not many people in the UFC have seen. That kind of person relying on it, but then going and working on his takedown defense, working on not getting taken to the ground and not getting submitted, just worrying about his defensive strategy, but then really focusing on the striking. And that's what brought him to the big show. That's what gave him to. That's what got him to the belt. So Wonderboy Thompson is a great example of that. This is a guy that focuses on one aspect of mixed martial arts, and this is someone who heavily relies on it. I mean, this guy's made it to the top, like I said. This guy's a real big test for Jeff Neal, who, you know, his nickname is Hands of Steel, so you got to watch out for his hands. And, I mean, this is going to be a great stepping stone after the Vicente Luque fight, which is a big win for him. Vicente Luque, a scary guy in the division. He doesn't have the biggest name, but someone that a lot of people would be worried to fight. Meaning that, like I said, he doesn't have the big name, and he's a knockout artist. A guy that at one point really relied on his jiu-jitsu, but then focused on his striking, and then I guess fell in love with it. But Wonderboy Thompson showed him that it takes years of experience. So this might be a great stepping stone for Wonderboy. But another thing that a lot of people don't talk about is Wonderboy is not Wonderboy anymore. Wonderboy is getting up there in age. Let me just Google Wonderboy's age. I think he is Wonderboy. So Wonderboy is 37 years old. Now, he's past his prime. I think this has to do with the way that he looks. He doesn't look like he's 37, but the guy's up there in age. So will he be, this is his last time that he can make a run, I think. He is doubling down on some of his out of the cage stuff. I mean, he's starting up his YouTube. He's starting up a bunch of that kind of stuff. And he's still got his school. So, I mean, I think he's set for post-fight life. But I seriously think that this is his last run in the UFC, especially in the welterweight division, where he has to stay pretty lean at 6 foot to be in this division. So how long can he do that for? He's an expert. He's been doing this stuff for his whole life. I mean, he's been doing karate tournaments and whatnot for a very long time. But how long can Wonderboy keep showing his spectacular movement? And just by that thought, like just talking about the movement, that's what Wonderboy's whole style is predicated on. The fact that he is able to stare you down, hands are down, no guard up, and just rely on his agility and quickness to get him and evade shots is what his whole style is about. So when is it going to be that time where he's just not going to have it anymore? Where he's just going to look and he's just going to take a shot. He's not even going to know. It happens all of a sudden where a fighter looks amazing one day and then the next day they lose their agility, they lose maybe their power, they might lose something. So when is that point coming for Stephen Wonderboy Thompson? This Jeff Neal is going to. This Jeff Neal fight is going to show us. This fight is going to show us if he is going to be able to make his way to the belt again, or this might show us that Wonderboy is slowly declining. So really excited for all these fights on December 19th. I'm going to watch this whole thing. I mean, going through a deep dive of this has really shown me how deep this kind of this card is. So, I mean, I'm not going to miss much of it. I'm going to try not to, but I'm going to watch the whole thing over recording and review all these fights, because there's some really interesting ones, and we chatted about it. The Jose Alda one is crazy. The Marlon Morais one is crazy. Anthony Pettis being on the prelims is great as well. At one point, you would have never thought that Anthony Pettis would be on the prelims, but now we're seeing it. So it was great chatting with you guys. Thank you for taking the time out of your day to listen to this podcast. I really appreciate it. And if you could like, subscribe, do all that good stuff on the different platforms, that'd be really appreciated. And thank you again. My name is Naz, and this has been the Body Punch Podcast. Bye.